You don't become a DEA agent to fight the war on drugs. You become one because you grew up 2 blocks from the front line and you figured, if someone's going to win this thing, it might as well be you. That's the lie you told yourself in 1997 when you filled out the federal application form at a folding table in the Albuquerque field office on Manal Boulevard, the one that smelled like burnt coffee and old carpet. You were 24. You had a mortgage-thin salary, a used Chevy Silverado with one functional window, and a copy of your academy completion certificate still curled from the mailing tube. You did not have a plan. What you had was a badge, and for a while you thought that was enough. It wasn't. You grew up in a place called Barreless, south of downtown Albuquerque. Real streets, not TV streets. Yes, the kind of neighborhood where the ice cream truck played its jingle at 9 p.m. and nobody thought that was strange because everyone already knew what was inside the ice cream truck. Your neighbor on the left sold weed from a cooler on his porch. Your neighbor on the right was a deacon. Your mother cleaned hotel rooms on Central Avenue for $8.40 an hour. Your father left when you were 6. Not dramatically, he just didn't come back from a Tuesday. You were 11 years old the first time you watched a DEA raid. 3 black SUVs, men in vests with yellow letters, shouting, glass breaking somewhere inside the Espinoza house. Then quiet. Then a man you knew. A man who had once helped you fix your bicycle chain, walked out in handcuffs, barefoot in a white undershirt. You watched from the curb. Something in you decided. Well, not that you wanted justice. You were 11. You didn't know what justice was. What you decided was, next time, you want to be the one wearing the vest. That is not heroism. That is a child doing math with the only numbers he has. Your first supervisor is a 52-year-old special agent named Dale Peterson who has a mustache like a retired football coach and the emotional temperature of a DMV waiting room. He teaches you 4 things in your first 3 months. 1. The drug dealer is not your enemy. The drug dealer is a symptom. Your enemy is whoever owns the building the drug dealer works from. 2. Every informant is lying to you. The good ones are just lying about smaller things. 3. If you want to understand a trafficking network, follow the money, not the drugs. The drugs are a distraction. The money is the system. So 4, and this one he says quietly, almost like it costs him something. Once you spend enough time in the dark starts to feel normal. That's when you're useful. That's also when you're dangerous. You write all 4 in a notebook. You lose the notebook 8 months later. But you remember all 4. By 2002, you're a GS-12 working interdiction operations out of El Paso. You've been in 3 undercover operations. You've testified in federal court twice. You've made 22 arrests that held up and 6 that didn't. Here's a thing nobody tells you. The 6 that didn't will follow you longer than the 22 that did. In 2003, you work a 6-month embed in a supply chain running meth from a lab in Chihuahua through Juarez and into Texas via refrigerated produce trucks. You drive a 2001 Ford F350 with fake plates. You are not DEA. You are Miguel Fuentes, a logistics coordinator from Sonora with a contact in El Paso and a preference for Lucky Strike cigarettes you hate, but smoke because Miguel smokes them. You arrest 4 people at the end of it, seize $2.1 million and enough product to supply a medium-sized suburb for a year. You get a commendation. You also get something else. You get the knowledge of what it actually feels like to live inside that world. The rhythm of it, the logic of it, the way it makes sense from the inside. And one night in the motel on Montana Avenue, still technically Miguel Fuentes, exhausted and running on 46 hours without sleep, a man you've been working next to for 4 months offers you something small, a line, something to take the edge off. You say no. The second time he offers, you say no. At the third time is 2005. Different operation, different city. You are 32 years old and you have not slept more than 4 consecutive hours in 11 days. And you are standing in the bathroom of a stash house in Phoenix, Arizona, and the man in the mirror doesn't look like you. He looks like someone who has been wearing your face without your permission. You say yes. By 2008, you understand how the machine works. The DEA operates across 21 domestic field divisions, 87 foreign offices, and an annual budget that in fiscal year 2008 was approximately $2.3 billion. It has enforcement groups, financial investigation units, intelligence teams, and a diversion control division dedicated specifically to pharmaceutical and prescription drug abuse. You are in that last division now. And here is what the Diversion Control Division knows that most people do not. The largest drug distribution networks in the United States are legal. They are run by publicly traded companies with investor calls and human resources departments and annual diversity reports. You investigate a pain clinic in Orlando that prescribed 9 million oxycodone tablets in a single year. 9 million. The clinic's owner drove a Mercedes G-Class and sponsored a Little League team. His waiting room had a fish tank with an actual clownfish in it. His patients drove from 4 states away and waited 3 hours to see a doctor for 6 minutes. You build the case. You present it. You file the paperwork. The clinic owner receives a $4.7 million fine, no prison time, and a 3-year license suspension. He reopens under his wife's name in 2011. This is not a conspiracy. This is a business model. Her name is Destiny. She is 9 years old. She is sitting on the floor of an apartment in Cincinnati that your team has just raided, and she is holding a stuffed rabbit that is missing one eye, and she is looking at you with an expression that is not fear. It's something worse. It's recognition. She recognizes the uniform. She knows what happens next. Her mother is in handcuffs. Low-level distribution. Personal use quantity, technically, but she has 3 prior contacts and your supervisor wants the charge to stick. The rabbit is blue, one eye. She holds it like it's the only fixed point in the room. You are 41 years old. You have been awake for 19 hours. Okay. You have 4 grams of pharmaceutical-grade cocaine in a small envelope in your left jacket pocket, evidence from a seizure 3 days ago that you told no one you kept. And your hands have not stopped shaking since Monday. You sit down on the floor, not because you're told to, not because protocol says to. You just sit down, eye level with a 9-year-old girl, and you ask her the rabbit's name. She says Captain. You say, that's a good name for a rabbit. You make a phone call. You call the Child Protective Services liaison, which is procedure, but then you make another call, not procedure, to a woman you know who runs a family stabilization nonprofit in Walnut Hills. You ask her to take the intake personally. It costs you a deposition. Your supervisor finds out you made contact outside the chain. He writes you up. Yet you don't care. That surprises you more than anything else. That you don't care. In 2013, your case handler at the Internal Affairs Division of the DEA calls you into a meeting room that has no windows and offers you water in a paper cup. His name is Brian. Brian tells you that 3 agents have independently reported concerns about your behavior. Erratic decision-making. Evidence discrepancies on 2 seizure logs. 1 incident where your response time was 40 minutes for a call that was 8 minutes from your position. Brian does not mention the cocaine, not yet. But Brian knows. You can see it in the way he watches your hands. Your hands are still shaking. The one person who speaks for you in that room is the last person you expect. His name is Hector Villanueva. He's a translator, a contractor. He has worked peripheral to your team for 6 years. You have spoken to him maybe 12 times. He is not required to be there. He tells Brian that in his professional observation, you have maintained mission-critical accuracy throughout your career. That your judgment in the field has directly resulted in outcomes that protected federal assets, and that any behavioral anomalies should be contextualized against operational stress levels that would qualify most people for a medical discharge. He says this in language that makes Brian write something down and close the folder. You look at Hector afterward. You want to ask him why. He says, because I've seen the ones who don't have anything left to lose and you're not one of them, not yet. That night you flush the envelope, not because you're clean, because you are. And for the first time in 3 years, afraid of what you're becoming. Fear is not the worst feeling. Sometimes fear is the only honest one. The operation that ends your career begins at 4:47 a.m. on a Wednesday in January 2014 in a parking structure in Las Vegas. You are there as a surveillance backup. That's all. You are supposed to be in an unmarked car on level 3 watching a stairwell. Instead, you are in the stairwell because you saw something that wasn't in the brief. A secondary vehicle. A man who wasn't in any of the photos who is walking with the weight distribution of someone carrying something under his coat. You radio it in. Command tells you to hold position. You don't hold position. What happens next takes 11 minutes. You will later write a 26-page incident report about those 11 minutes. But you will revise it 4 times. The 4th version will omit 2 details that you are not ready to explain to anyone, including yourself. The man under the coat was carrying a weapon. He was also 22 years old, and his name was later listed in the arrest report as Tomas Escobar Delgado. And somewhere in those 11 minutes, when he looked at you, you saw something in his face that was specific and old and had nothing to do with threat assessment. He looked like you looked, standing on a curb in Bareilles, watching a man get walked out of a house in handcuffs in a white undershirt. He was doing the same math, with the same numbers. You get him out. Not free. You don't have that kind of power. But you get him a deal. You call in a favor you've been holding since 2009. It costs you something you can't get back. You drive home at 6:15 a.m. as the sun comes up over the Nevada desert, flat and orange and indifferent. Your phone has 11 missed calls. Your hands have stopped shaking, which scares you more than when they were shaking. You pull over. You sit on the shoulder of the 95 for 22 minutes. You don't cry. You don't pray. You just sit there with the window down, listening to the sound of the desert, which is almost nothing, which is almost peace. You retire in 2015, formally. They give you a plaque and a handshake and a pension that covers rent, but not the kind of quiet you're trying to buy. You move to a house in Taos. Small, 1 bedroom. A view of the mountains that you look at every morning like you're trying to figure out what it's for. You haven't touched anything in 14 months when you find, while unpacking a box from storage, your old Academy completion certificate. Still curled from the original mailing tube, you'd forgotten you still had it. You look at it for a long time. Here is what you realize, slowly, like water finding the lowest point in a room. The war on drugs is not a war. A war has 2 sides, and at least one of them is trying to win. This was something else. This was a system that needed the problem to justify the solution. The problem was always going to be there because the solution required it. The drugs were never the point. The point was the budget. The point was the structure. The point was the reason men like you got up every morning and drove towards something instead of away from it. Because driving towards something, even if it's on fire, is still better than standing still. You were never fighting the war on drugs. You were part of the machinery that kept the war running. And the most devastating thing, the thing that lands in your chest like a stone dropped into deep water, is that you knew this. Somewhere around 2006, maybe earlier, you knew this. And you kept going anyway, because the alternative was going back to Bareilles, going back to being the kid on the curb. And you had decided at age 11 that you were never going to be that kid again. It turns out you were wrong. You were always that kid. You were just wearing a different vest. That was a character, a constructed life, a composite of real case files, congressional testimonies, and investigations that have been documented in public record. But here is the thing about constructed lives. They're made from real materials. The DEA has seized trillions of dollars in drugs since 1973. The street price of cocaine in America has dropped 80% in the same period. Those 2 facts exist in the same sentence. Draw your own conclusions. The character in this story is not good or bad. He is a person shaped by a place and a system and a series of decisions that each made sense in the moment they were made. That's the most uncomfortable part. Not that people like him exist, that we understand why. If this story made you feel something, uncomfortable, seen, curious, angry, drop it in the comments. Tell me which moment got you. And if you're here for the first time, subscribe, because this is the kind of place where we don't look away from the complicated parts. The story stays with you. That's the whole point.